Hey everyone, Devin here. I want to talk about how to choose a tarot deck. I get this question a lot from beginners, but also from people who perhaps just had a tarot deck come to them and now they want to choose one for their own. So in this video, we're going to talk about how to choose, how I personally like to choose similarities and differences that tarot decks can have, and also some myths on how to come into getting a tarot deck and even how to keep your tarot deck stored. So let's jump right in and talk about how to choose your deck, whether it's your first or just your next. So I tell beginners, let's go back to basics. So there's the Rider-Waite Tarot. Now, I don't have one of these decks. I was feeling called to give it to a friend about a year ago, but it's the most popular one that you see. So here's a little illustration of what this deck looks like. Now, this was the original deck used for divination. It was made for the purpose that we'll be using them. So the history of tarot is its own mystical thing, but we're going to keep practical here. I prefer to learn off of the Rider-Waite Tarot deck. The symbology is like the traditional and beautiful and so all encapsulating. It really has the energy that each card I feel needs to have all of the different pieces of the life cycle and what we're dealing with in our own personal life journey. So I learned the tarot on that deck, and how I choose my future decks is I always like to make sure that the symbology of the deck that I'm using can be related back to the Rider-Waite deck. So that's what I like to get into, but then it's also a lot of just what calls to you, what excites you when you're shuffling the cards and when you lay them out and you see these illustrations, what just feels like a deep resonance with you. And so some people like the darker kind of cards, and I think that we're all used to seeing kind of the doom and gloom kind of readers and readings, usually portrayed by media. The death card always comes out. So let's look at that. So I have 3 decks I'm going to show you, and 2 of these I use professionally and 1 of these I use personally. So first, let me show you the death card for the Moon and Sun Tarot. So here we have a beautiful phoenix, and it actually says death and rebirth at the bottom. So a lot of people get afraid of the death card. In fact, when they sit in my chair, one of the things that they'll blurt out is, I hope I don't get death. We're not talking about interpretations today, but if you have questions about that, let me know. Here's another death card. Oh, look, there's the phoenix again, symbolizing rebirth and letting a lot of our BS go, belief systems, actual BS. So here's the deck that I use personally. By the way, this is Shadowscape's deck. Love it. This is the Gilded Tarot. Now, here we have the death cards, one that you might think you're going to see, but let's look at the symbology. We have things like the shield here, protective energy. We have this white pure lotus here, symbolizing what we're coming into next, peace, tranquility, rebirth. So yes, we have the skull symbolizing the more traditional view of death, but there is so much symbology in these cards that we can read into it even more. So it doesn't mean that you're going to die tomorrow. Forget that. So how to choose your deck? Perhaps start with the Rider-Waite deck. If this is your first deck, I love learning on that. And you can find excellent books like this one, which go through each of the cards and give you all these different ways to interpret. I still love using books because, especially when I'm reading for myself, I like to be very biased and argue with the tarot as I'm doing it. So when I pick up this book and I'm reading through it, the lines that jump out to me that are kind of highlighted by my mind's eye, then I know that's what I need to work on. And it just helps me argue just a little bit less. Let's keep going. Differences and similarities in tarot decks. Now, similarities, let's start there. Each deck has 68 cards. They have the major arcana and the minor arcana, which are our suits, like our elements, water, fire, earth, and air, which translates to cups, wands, I said earth, so pentacles and swords, right off the top of my head. So we have the same cards in every tarot deck. If it has more cards or less cards, I personally stay away from it. This is like the one thing that I like to stay traditional with. If you know me, I'm a rule breaker. But I do like to have my 78 cards, no extra, no less. And the difference is in the artistry, the artwork, like we just saw. Even the two that were still a phoenix, very different artwork, very different interpretations of the energy in the card, even though the symbology can still be related back to the same. So those are our similarities, hands down, same number of cards and the same kind of layout, if you will. Now, differences, the artwork, that's the numero uno. Some don't have any symbology at all. Some are very minimalist and basic, where it'll be like the Three of Swords, but it's just a little triangle. So for new beginner readers, those are a little bit harder to interpret. It's harder to invoke feeling. If you're reading for other people, I like the images to invoke some sort of feeling, thought, whatever. But those more minimalist ones don't have that. So that's something to consider as well if you're looking for something with like a really nice artwork or something really basic. Keep that in mind, especially if you're still learning to read the tarot. Okay, so I want to look at the Nine of Cups in these three different decks as well. So here's the one I use personally, the Gilded Tarot. A jolly old man, he's got all these cups, he's feeling super proud about it. And then we have the Sun and Moon, Nine of Cups. She's happy about this as well. She's just kind of jumping around, leaping, walking on water. And then the Nine of Cups and Shadowscapes. Still a super joyous, freeing looking kind of card. The fish are just swimming around in their school, and this guy has his own light that's being shown. So there you see the differences in the artwork, yet the feeling is there. As you start to interpret cards in your own sort of way, and this will change reading to reading depending on what you're looking at, any questions, who's sitting in front of you, or if it's just for you how you're feeling, you'll start to gravitate towards a style of tarot just naturally on your own. And that's another reason why I say start with the basics. Start with this Rider-Waite deck and then go from there. All right, so some myths that I've heard, well, I'm going to call them myths because I don't necessarily buy into it. You have to be gifted your first tarot deck. Now, in all honesty, this is how tarot came to me. Somebody gave me a deck and was like, I feel like this is going to be right up your alley. Why don't you give it a go? But does that have to be the case? Do you have to be given your first deck or all your decks? I don't think so. Amazon is here for a reason, y'all. We can find so many great decks online in different stores. And I love to watch YouTube reviews of decks so I get it like a preview of what all of this artwork looks like, and to make sure that, you know, I feel like this is resonating with my style of reading, which is much more like life coaching. It's much more, what do we need to get real with and look at? And how can we use all of those lessons and come into some actionable steps so that we can either embrace this positivity or start to release and replace this negativity. So feel free to buy your own deck. I don't think that you're going to curse your tarot gods if you buy your own deck by any means. It's a tool. When it comes down to it, yes, we're using some intuition and we're trusting. The part of divination is trusting that the perfect cards are going to lay out for you as they need to. But I don't think it matters if it comes from Amazon or some lady with crystals, you know, that's gifting it to you. One other thing I want to say is, after you have got your tarot deck, how do you store the tarot deck? Now, let me tell you, you can see in my death card, I've been using this deck for quite some time. Let me find it. There, wear and tear happens. You see down here, it's kind of been scratched up. Every now and then a card gets bent. So we want to make sure that we're storing them in a way that keeps them nice and neat. One of the ways I do this is through a cloth, and I really like this technique because then when I unravel this, I have a placemat, if you will, in my purple cloth. This, you can use anything to tie it together. I got this from a Nako concert, which I just absolutely loved. It says Aloha Keakua, one of my favorite songs by them. But so I unwrap it, I have my placemat there. You can also buy little pouches, pre-made. I have a little black pouch for my Shadowscape deck that has the fertility goddess embroiled on it. It's really adorable. It's really simple. You toss it in there, you're good to go. Some people like to use boxes, and I've even heard of people using old cell phone boxes, which happen to be a perfect size to fit tarot in. But any sort of box, you can make one, you can keep the box that they come in. That's another thing that some people don't like to do. They like to get it out of its box and make it its own little home. It's personal preference. I don't think there's anything that you can do wrong or poorly. Just let it really be things that excite you, things that fit into your lifestyle and practice. Let it be your own. Just like I say in my yoga classes, let this practice be your own. Tarot as well. Let this be your own process. Go through, find decks. If it doesn't resonate with you, get a different one, and gift that one, and maybe they'll feel super excited that their first one was gifted to them. I'm going to end there. If you have more questions, comment, ask me your questions. I'm really diving into some basic things, let's talk about tarot. So many people have asked me for workshops and to teach how to read tarot. And I just think hell yeah, I've really enjoyed this with my own personal practice. I continue to use it. Now it's half of my profession. So let's talk about it. Ask me your questions. Let me answer them. And if you're interested in a reading, hit me up. You know where to find me. If it's not on YouTube, my website is devonearth.com. It's also my Instagram and my Facebook. Shoot me a message. Let's get to talking about tarot. Thanks, y'all. Namaste.